Hi, I'm Mark Doty, and you're watching Poets House Presents. I'm reading from my apartment here in Chelsea in New York City. I'm going to read 3 poems for you. 2 of them are from a new manuscript in progress. It's still a ways away, and the title is still uncertain. The poems are still emerging. The other poem is from my book Atlantis, which is from the mid-90s. The book is concerned particularly with the consequences of HIV in my own life and in the community in which I live. I'm going to read 3 poems today, each of them concerned in some way with time and how we think about past, present, and future. This is a new poem. It appeared in the American Poetry Review, and you can find it on their website if you're interested in looking at that. It's a poem that tries to respond to something that it feels unspeakable to me, the murder of a 12-year-old boy. Many of you will know his name, Tamir Rice, who was killed by the police in Cleveland, Ohio, after he was seen playing with a plastic toy gun in the park. It's also a poem that wants to think about time, what happens when a life is interrupted. In 2 seconds, Tamir Rice, 2002 to 2014. The boy's face climbed back down the 12-year tunnel of its becoming. Charcoal sunflower swallowing itself. Who has eyes to see or ears to hear? If you could see what happens fastest, unmaking the human irreplaceable, a star falling into complete gravitational darkness from all points of itself, all this, the held, loved body, into which entered milk and music, honeying the cells of him, who sang to him, stroked the nape of the scalp, kissed the flesh knot, after the cord completed its work of fueling into him the long history of those whose suffering was made more bearable by the as yet unknown of him, playing alone in some unthinkable future city, a Cleveland, whatever that might be. 2 seconds to elapse. The arc of joy in the conception bed, the labor of hands repeated until the hands no longer required attention, so that as the woman folded, her hopes for him sank into the fabric of his shirts and underpants. Down they go, swirling down into the maw of a greater dark. Treasure box, comic books, pocket knife, bed from a lost cat's collar. Why even begin to enumerate them when behind every tributary poured into him comes rushing backward all he hasn't been yet? Everything that boy could have thought or made, sung or theorized, built on the quavering but continuous structure that had preceded him, sank into an absence in the shape of a boy playing with a plastic gun in a city park in Ohio in the middle of the afternoon. When I say 2 seconds, I don't mean the time it took him to die. I mean the lapse between the instant the cruiser braked to a halt on the grass, between that moment and the one in which the officer fired his weapon. The 2 seconds taken to assess the situation. And though I believe it is the work of art to try on at least the moment and skin of another, for this hour, I respectfully decline. I refuse it. May that officer be visited every night of his life by an enormity collapsing in front of him into an incomprehensible bloom, and the voice that howls out of it. If this is no poem, then. But that voice, erased boy, beloved of time, who did nothing to no one and became nothing because of it, I know that voice is one of the things we call poetry. It isn't to his killer he's speaking. This poem is a section from a sequence called Atlantis. It was written during the time of my partner Wally Roberts' illness in the mid-90s. Wally died of HIV-related complications in January of 1994. This is the title section of the sequence, which is called Atlantis. It refers to a beautiful salt marsh at the very end of Cape Cod in Provincetown, a place where Wally and I were living at the time of his illness. And that marsh fills and empties every day. Promise and disappearance. Atlantis. I thought your illness a kind of solvent, dissolving the future a little at a time. I didn't understand what's to come was always just a glimmer up ahead, veiled like the marsh gone under its tidal sheet of mildly rippling aluminum. What those salt distances were is also where they're going. Forms blankly silvered span towards specificity. The curve of certain brave islands of grass, temporary shoulder-wide rivers where herons ply their twin trades of study and desire. I've seen two white emissaries unfolded like heaven's linen, untouched, enormous, a fluid exhalation. Early spring, too cold yet for green, too early for the tumble and rack of last season to be anything but promise. But there in the air was the triumph of all flowering, the soul lifted up, if we could still believe in the soul after so much diminishment. Breath from the unpromising waters, up across the pond and two-lane highway, pure purpose over the dune, gone. Tomorrow's unreadable as this shining acreage. The future's nothing but this moment's gleaming rim. Now the tide's begun its clockwork turn, pouring in the day's hourglass toward the other side of the world, and our dependable marsh reappears, empty of that starched and angular grace that spirited the ether, lessened, but here. And our ongoingness, what there'll be of us? Look, love, the lost world rising from the waters again. Our continent, where it always was, emerging from the half-light, drenched, unchanged. The title character in this poem is a terrier named George, Little George. Barks at whatever's not the world as he prefers to know it. Trash sacks, hand trucks, black hats, canes and hoods, shovels, someone smoking a joint beneath the overhang of the Haitian evangelicals. Anyone, how dare they, walking a dog. George barks, the tense white comma of himself arced in alarm. At home, he floats in the creaturely domestic, curled in the warm triangle behind a sleeper's knees, wiggling on his back on the sofa, all jelly and thighs, receiving a belly rub. No worries. But outside the apartment's metal door, the unmanageable day assumes its blurred and infinite disguises. Best to bark. No matter that he's slightly larger than a toaster. He proceeds as if he rules a rectangle 2 blocks deep, bounded west and east by 7th Avenue and Union Square. Whatever's there is there by his consent, and subject to the rebuke of his refusal, though when he asserts his will, he trembles. If only he were not solely responsible for raising outcry at any premonition of trouble on West 16th Street, or if, right out on the pavement, he might lay down the clanking armor of his bluster. Some evening, when he's climbed the stairs after our late walk and rounds the landing turn and turns his way toward his steady sleep, I wish he might be visited by a dream of the world as kind, how any looming unreadable might turn out to hold the April green of an unsullied tennis ball. Dear one, surely the future is not entirely out to get us, and if it is, barking won't help much. But no such luck, not yet. He takes umbrage this morning at a stone image serene in a neighbor's garden and stiffens and fixes and sounds his wild alarm. Damn you, Buddha, get out of here. Go away. Poets House has been a mainstay in the life of people who love this art in New York City and nationally for decades now. More and more people are brought to our art every year by exposure to it through Poets House. And one of the things that the organization has done, which I treasure, is an annual walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge, of course, is very close to the site where Brooklyn Ferry plied back and forth in the 19th century. And Brooklyn Ferry was sacred ground, sacred water in American poetry, and the bridge is now, both because of Walt Whitman and because of his successor, Hart Crane, who loved that bridge and saw in it an emblem of America's movement into the future, the soul's leap into toward tomorrow. One of the things that I loved best about the bridge walk was the chance to stand in front of an audience on the other side, down in Dumbo, and read Crossing Brooklyn Ferry aloud. It's one of the great poems of the 19th century. It's one of the great American poems. It's a world classic because it attends so closely to what it is to go forward and back, to go ahead into tomorrow with others in company. Whitman says, just as you were one of a crowd, I was one of a crowd. I too felt as you did. I don't know another poet who has made such a deliberate reach into the future toward his readers, who believed that his audience would come and spoke to them. It's an act on his part of great courage. It is one that feels uncanny because there's a living voice gone 200 years almost, speaking to us so directly and so personally, and reassuring us, among other things, that poetry matters. That poetry is a way of building a bridge, building community between people. And have we ever needed that more than we need it now? To know that we hold much in common, that we have common ground between us, that we have a mutual destination, perhaps, which I hope is a real vital democracy. Certainly our prophet of democracy believed that. He said, my America is an idea. Not that it's really here, but it's an idea I have lived for. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but I think he would have signed on to that statement. I urge you to join me in supporting Poets House and being a part of this truly beautiful work on behalf of the human spirit and the human community. Thank you for watching Poets House Presents. I'm Mark Doty. I'm the author of this new book, What is the Grass? Walt Whitman in My Life, published by Norton. You can find information about it on my publisher's website. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed these programs, please consider giving a contribution to Poets House. For more than 30 years, they've kept the door wide open to everyone for the joy of poetry. Recently, they have temporarily had to shut the door and are reeling from the financial implications. Please give, even a small donation if you can. Thank you.